started. All right, well, thanks again for joining us for this webinar, 10 ways that you can help save sea turtles. I'm going to go through a little bit about sea turtles. I'm going to talk about why they're endangered, and I'm going to go through a whole bunch of ways that anybody can help protect sea turtles. Some of those will be kind of general things. Some of those will be things specifically related to our programs. Yeah, let's get started. So one quick thing I wanted to announce is that with this popularity, we had a couple of previous webinars that were really well attended. We had more than 350 people sign up for this one. We don't expect all of them to be able to attend, but that's still a tremendous number for people signing up. So we've decided to make this a regular thing. We're going to be doing a series of webinars. So we've already done one a few months ago that was kind of a general sea turtle overview. This one is tips on how to protect them. And the ones that we have coming up will be around specific aspects of sea turtles, of conservation, of protecting them, of some of the threats that they face. So some of the topics we're going to talk about are sea turtles in tourism, plastic and sea turtles. You may be familiar with that issue. We'll talk a little bit about it tonight. The illegal trade of sea turtles, protecting hatchings and nesting beaches. And these are going to loosely correspond with a book that I have coming out. This is very exciting. I worked with more than 30 of the world's sea turtle experts to put together a book that'll be out in less than 2 weeks called Sea Turtle Research and Conservation, Lessons from Working in the Field. So I'm going to be having some of the people who wrote parts of the book for me on as guests. So they will be monthly. They'll start in probably mid-December, and everybody will get an email with announcements about the timing and subjects and all of that stuff. So, sea turtles. How many sea turtles are there? Well, when we talk about sea turtles, there really aren't that many species. When we talk about some kinds of animals, there could be dozens or hundreds of species. With sea turtles, we're only talking about 7 different species, which is great because it's much easier to remember that way. So these are the 7 species that you can find in the world. You'll see that there's actually 8 in the picture here. On the far right are both the same species. So the one on the bottom is the green turtle, and then the Pacific green turtle, otherwise known as the black turtle, on the top one. So that's a subspecies of the green turtle. Leatherback's a big one here in the middle. Below that is the loggerhead. Moving to the left is the hawksbill. The shiny one here next to the leatherback is the flatback. The one in the top left corner is the Kemp's ridley, and the one in the top in the middle is the olive ridley. So when we talk about the different species of sea turtles tonight, these will be all the ones that I am referring to. So we're talking about how to protect them. Well, there has to be a reason to protect them, right? All 7 species of sea turtles in the world have some category of being endangered, either critically endangered like the hawksbill and the Kemp's ridley, endangered like the green, or vulnerable like the leatherback, loggerhead, and olive ridley. You'll see that the flatback is listed as data deficient, which means that the researchers have determined that there isn't enough information to be able to tell whether they or not are endangered, but in Australia, which is pretty much the only place that they live in the world, they are listed as endangered, so we can be pretty confident that they are endangered as well. So some of the reasons that they are endangered, people in many places continue to eat turtle eggs and turtle meat, although that's reduced quite a bit, but it is still happening. People use their shells for different things, which I will talk about later. Turtles get caught in fishing gear. Climate change is a big issue for sea turtles. So as I go through the presentation, I'll talk about some of these threats as well. So, if we're also talking about why sea turtles, what we can do to protect sea turtles, there has to be a reason why they're important, right? Well, they're important for a lot of reasons. Sea turtles are important for the habitats that they live in. For example, the green turtle is important for seagrass beds. They're grazers when they're adults. They're sort of like the cows of the ocean. And the seagrass beds that they eat have been shown by a number of different studies to actually in some cases be healthier than ones that are not grazed by sea turtles. In terms of other things that they eat, most species of sea turtles will eat jellyfish. And so jellyfish in many places around the world are exploding in population. So we need as many sea turtles in the ocean as possible to help control their numbers. Another species, the Hawksbill turtle, eats primarily sea sponges, which compete with coral for space. So in a coral reef, if there's no animal like a hawksbill that's eating the sea sponges, which are toxic, so they don't have very many predators toxic to animals except for hawksbills, then they can outcompete coral reefs and reduce their size and their diversity. They're also really important for the food that they provide for others. When they're hatchlings, like this photo here, this hatchling can actually fit in the palm of your hand. When they're that small or when they're an egg, they're incredibly vulnerable to predators. And that can mean feral predators like dogs and cats in a lot of places where people might not have the money to feed their animals or get them spayed and neutered. But lots of wild animals will eat sea turtle eggs or hatchlings, and that includes birds and fish, crabs. There's a type of fly that will lay its larva on top of the sand above a sea turtle nest, and the larva will crawl down into the nest and eat the eggs as they develop. There are mammals like raccoons and coatis will eat them, and others. So going back to this, our best estimate is 1 out of 1,000 of these little hatchlings survives and grows up to be an adult sea turtle, which is a really tiny number, right? But when you add up over their lifetimes how many eggs a sea turtle will lay, the sea turtle can lay anywhere from 80 to more than 200 eggs in a nest. And they can lay, 2 to 3 times as many as 7 or 8 or more times per season in the case of the leatherbacks. And that'll usually be every other year or so, and that can be for 30, 40 or more years. So if you add all that up, that can be more than 4,000 or 5,000 eggs laid by an individual adult female over its lifetime. So hopefully 4 or 5 of those are getting through, and that means thousands of hatchlings are there for other animals, and they're a really important source of food for many different species. They're also an important source of food for some predators as adults, particularly sharks are the primary predators of the adult sea turtles. They're one of the only ones big enough, strong enough to be able to bite through that shell, although there are a few other predators. Sea turtles are important for many coastal communities around the world. Sea turtle watching has become a fairly big business in a lot of places and provides really important income for a lot of small coastal communities that tourism doesn't really get to otherwise. They also have really important reasons for cultures. For many indigenous cultures around the world, worship sea turtles, believe that their ancestors or have different aspects of their culture related to sea turtles. This is from the Kuna people in the Caribbean side of Panama. So, getting into the tips. Tip number 1, don't buy tortoiseshell. You've heard of tortoiseshell. You may have a pair of glasses that have this pattern. It is quite a distinctive and beautiful pattern, the browns and oranges and yellow. This stuff comes from the shell of the hawksbill sea turtle. And because of this trade, the hawksbill sea turtle is critically endangered around the world. So the estimates that I've seen of the number of adult females alive right now around the world range from 15 to 25,000. Seems like it may be a fair amount, but if you look at the data, a recent study came out by the Monterey Bay Aquarium that estimated that as many as 9 million hawksbills were traded from the mid-1800s to the late 1900s, over about 150 years, most of them going to Japan, which still has a legal domestic industry, although they claim to not any longer import them. That is disputed by some conservationists. But they can still be found for sale, even though it's illegal in most places around the world. So we have a program called True Rare to Wear. We've done quite a bit of research working with organizations around the world to figure out where it's being sold and in how much quantities. We just came out with a worldwide report that looked at 40 different countries around the world that still have this trade, 10 in a major way. So just for your own little game here. Can you spot the tortoiseshell item on the table? It's pretty front and center. This thing right here is the tortoiseshell, and I think these rings up here probably are, though they're a little bit blurry. So when you are shopping in a place like in the Americas, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Cuba, Colombia are places where you can find these products pretty commonly in a number of places. Here's some more photos of tortoiseshell. And so it's illegal to buy them anywhere but Japan and Grenada. It's illegal to bring them home into the U.S. If you tried to and you got caught, you could be fined. And if you had a bunch of it, it could potentially cause jail time. So how do you avoid this stuff? Well, we've put together a pretty handy guide on how to tell what is and what is not, because there is a lot of faux tortoiseshell. There's a lot of things that look like it could be tortoiseshell but is not. You see on the left side here, there's coconut shell. These are cow horn, and these are plastic or resin. So we have this guide. I will send out a link to it. Is one great way to be able to tell what is and what is not Hawksbill sea turtle. So what can you do? So we have a pledge on our website. Again, I'll send out a link to avoid tortoiseshell. You can take a printout of our guide with you whenever you travel to any of the places. Other places that we found that have this trait include China. I mentioned Japan. Indonesia is a pretty big place where it is. So any of those places that you go to, you might see tortoiseshell for sale as you're walking around the souvenir shops, because it's primarily sold to travelers. And if you do see it, whenever we start traveling again, hopefully that'll be soon. If you do see it for sale online, it's pretty commonly sold on Facebook, eBay. It's sometimes found, different auction websites. If you see it, again, I'll send out a link. You can report it to us anonymously or tell us who you are, where you found it, and we can try to take steps to get it removed. Tip number 2. Help stop climate change. When you think of climate change and animals, you may think of polar bears or some other animals. Sea turtles are as much a poster animal for climate change as any other animal, because they're affected in a number of ways. One, sea turtles, the sex of the hatchlings depends on the temperature of where it is in the nest and the sand that's around it. And so that means warmer nests will result in more female hatchlings. Colder nests will result in more males. And so as temperatures rise around the world, and we're seeing this happen on nesting beaches around the world because a lot of places take the temperature of the sand, we're finding that more and more females are being born, and that's a problem. There's a study a couple years ago from Australia that estimated 99% of their hatchlings were female. Not just climate change, but also the extraction of fossil fuels is a big problem. You probably all remember the BP oil spill. Not only the oil spill, but the dispersant that was used afterwards were both very, very toxic to sea turtles and other marine life in the Gulf of Mexico. Rising sea levels are affecting nesting beaches. Hello, puppy. And so as sea levels rise, they erode nesting beaches and expose nests like this one, and that can kill the nest and prevent them from hatching. Another impact from global warming, as ocean waters temperatures rise, it causes a phenomenon called coral bleaching. If you've heard about the Great Barrier Reef and huge portions of it dying off, it's because of primarily of coral bleaching, because when the ocean gets hot, the coral polyps are expelled from their structures, and that, if that happens over and over again, can kill the reefs. So what can you do about global warming? You're just one person? Well, there's actually quite a bit. You can support renewable energy. Most now, or a lot of power companies, your own power company may have options where you can switch to energy generated by wind and by solar, by thermoelectric, by dams, things like that. And so there's an option. Sometimes you pay a little extra a month. Here in Portland, where I live, we have an option for community solar. And I just switched to it. It's actually going to save me some money every year and support a brand new solar installation that they're putting here. So go to your energy company's website and look to see what options they might have. I also recently purchased my first electric car, and it is amazing, and I will never go back to gas-powered. I highly recommend it. It's an amazing ride, very little maintenance, and getting cheaper and more options by the day. Another thing you can do is use your voice. You can tell your representatives that you want strong action for climate change. It's more important than ever. We just had a big election here in the United States, and those of us who care about the issue of climate change are pretty excited with the outcome. Climate change is a very big issue in this campaign, and we're glad to see it becoming something more covered in our country's elections. We also have a very specific action that we're going to ask people to take, and again, I'll send out a link. Our friends at the Sea Turtle Conservancy are working to try with some groups in the Bahamas to try to stop some potential oil drilling that will happen in very important ocean habitat for sea turtles, for dolphins, for many other animals. And you can send a note to the Bahamas government and ask them to cancel these leases and instead invest in renewable energy. Tip number 3, eat responsible seafood. Fisheries around the world are one of the biggest threats to sea turtles. This is a sea turtle caught on a long line. And so what this is exactly what it sounds like. These lines can be 50 miles long and have thousands of hooks. And they're pretty indiscriminate. Any single animal that grabs onto that bait can get caught. And sea turtles, being air-breathing reptiles, have to get to the surface, and they will not be able to survive. They can also get caught in shrimp nets and a bunch of other different kind of nets. There was a study done a few years ago by a colleague named Brian Wallace and others who estimated as many as 1.5 million sea turtles caught in the world's fisheries over a 20-year period, which is a gigantic number. There's not that many sea turtles in the world to lose that many over a 20-year period. So there are a whole bunch of people working on these issues. This is an issue we may cover in an upcoming webinar if it's something that you're interested in. But for example, one thing is called a turtle excluder device. And this is a thing that's used on shrimp nets where there's a metal grate put across the mouth of the net. If a sea turtle, they may be eating the shrimp, gets caught in there, they can escape out a little hole in the bottom while the shrimp pass through the net. And now this is required on just about every shrimp net in the United States, and we also will not import shrimp from any countries that do not enforce the use of these. So how can you find sustainable seafood when you go shopping? Well, there's 2 good resources, and I'll just say right now, neither of these are perfect resources. There's a lot of difference in opinion between how well fisheries are doing, but these are 2 ways that can help guide decisions that you make. Monterey Bay Aquarium, wonderful organization, really do a lot for ocean conservation. They have something called Seafood Watch. You can go to Seafood Watch, you can get a Seafood Watch app, and you can get these guides that when you're out at a restaurant or out at a supermarket, depending upon where you are, it'll tell you which seafood is well managed, which is kind of managed in the middle, and which ones are poorly managed and to avoid. There's also a certification body called the Marine Stewardship Council. You can look for this little checkmark fish kind of logo thing. They have a way that they monitor different fisheries around the world. And so this is also a way that you can try to improve the type of fish that you're buying to make sure that it's not catching a whole bunch of things like turtles and dolphins and other things. Number 4, say no to plastic. You could probably guess that I was going to go here at some point. Plastic is a really huge problem. We believe, us at Sea Turtles, believe that sea turtles are interacting with plastic. Every sea turtle on Earth is interacting with plastic throughout its entire life cycle. Hatchlings may need to climb through plastic on their way from the nest down to the water. Sea turtles can confuse them for jellyfish very easily and eat them. They can get caught in it, 6-pack rings or things like discarded fishing gear, which we include in ocean plastics. So it's a big problem, and it's one that's growing really, really rapidly around the world. So what can you do to stop plastic from getting into the ocean? Because there's a whole bunch of efforts to clean up the ocean, and while we think those are laudable, right now, of the things that are out there, we don't see any that don't cause a whole bunch of problems themselves by catching other ocean wildlife, for example, or just not being able to get to the scale necessary to clean up all of that plastic. So what we tell people is we want to try to first turn off that spigot, try to prevent as much plastic from getting out into that ocean as we can. And so some of the things that we recommend avoiding: single-use plastic bags are probably the biggest problem. A lot of states and cities around the United States are starting to ban them. We have here in Oregon, which is really wonderful. I was very excited that that finally happens. Helium balloons can also be confused for jellyfish. So if you do get a helium balloon, make sure to hold on to it really tightly. If they go off up into the air, you can be thousands of miles, hundreds of miles from the ocean, and they can end up there. We are also seeing things like plastic utensils and straws ending up in the bodies of sea turtles. You may have seen the video of the straw being extracted from the sea turtle's nose. So these are all things that we don't really need. We have utensils. We can avoid using them, look for alternatives, things like that. Again, this is another area where you can use your voice. If any of you are fans of Trader Joe's, I certainly am, but I've always been appalled at how much of their produce and products have plastic packaging. And so an environmental organization, Greenpeace, pressured Trader Joe's and had people send emails to them saying, hey, reduce your amount of plastic that you use, and it worked. They're cutting 1 million pounds of single-use plastic from their stores, which is a pretty wonderful thing. There's always, taking your bag to the supermarket with you. Super simple, super easy thing to do. Does not increase any risk of COVID or anything like that. This one here is, you may have heard of Vance Joy. He's a pretty popular singer who created a line of these bags and raised more than $10,000 for us by selling these at his concert. So thank you, Vance, if you're out there listening. As I mentioned, here in Oregon, people encouraged our elected leaders to ban plastic bags, and as well as straws. And so straws can be important. There are people that need straws. It's important to have those as an option, but everybody does not need a straw for every single drink that they do. And if you do, there are options, which we have in our store. So I'm going to do a little plugging of our online store. We have a few different products that can reduce the amount of plastic that you use. These necklaces that you see here, we actually work with an organization in Malaysia that collects plastic, melts it down, and makes these awesome necklaces that you can get from our store. We are selling reusable straws in our store as well. And, if you are doing any walking outside, you're probably seeing the single-use masks ending up. They're becoming a real big source of problem. We have wonderful, beautiful, turtle-friendly cloth masks that we're selling in our online store. Number 5, responsible turtle watching. So sea turtles, they live in a lot of places where people like to go. And so whether you're going to a place where sea turtles live specifically to see them or just to vacation, again, hope we're really crossing our fingers that will be possible again in the somewhat near future. So there's a number of things that you can do when you're in sea turtle habitat to not stress them out, injure them, things like that. One is keeping your distance. This is probably the single most important thing. We always recommend at least 3 meters. It's about 10 feet away from a sea turtle, either on land or in the water. And that's plenty close when you're nearby them to be able to see them. Unless you're volunteering, like with one of our trips where you're working hands-on with researchers who are supervising and everything like that. You never want to feed sea turtles or really any wild animal. You don't want to touch them. Again, unless you're part of a permitted program that's under supervision. Those things can stress them out. So if you see them on a beach, keep your distance. We also recommend either in the water or on the beach to stay behind the turtle. If they can't see you, you're less likely to stress them out. So this is a picture. It's actually my daughter at a beach in Costa Rica using good sea turtle watching technique. It's hard to tell from the picture itself, but she is a good enough distance away. If you're working with a program where you're seeing hatchlings, make sure your hands are clean, wear gloves whenever possible, things like that. One big thing that we're starting to see a lot of now on things like Instagram, where people specifically want to get their great photo with a sea turtle, a turtle selfie. These are not good practices. Number one, people are putting themselves in front of the turtle. That blocks the turtle's path. That can stress them out. It can cause them to stop eating. People are touching turtles here. People are putting like their little selfie sticks in front of turtles. We don't want to do any of those things. You always want to leave the turtle a clear path. You always want to give them enough distance. You never want to touch them or stress them out just so that you can have a cool photo to put on social media. We have a whole bunch of tips. I talked about a few of those things, but we'll send some more out as well. So following on that, to plug our own programs a little bit, join a turtle conservation tour. We do what we call sea turtle conservation tours, and that is where you can go on a trip and support local efforts and local communities to protect sea turtles. We've helped generate more than $1 million for turtle conservation and for local communities through the trips that we've run over the past 10 years, and we're really proud of that. And we are the only that we know of, nonprofit or tour operator, that has transparent pricing for all of our trips. So when you go to our website and you look at our trips, you can see for every single trip how much of that cost goes towards conservation and research, how much of it stays in the local community, and how much of it is used for travel costs. So transportation, food, lodging, all those kinds of things. So we have 4 trips that we're hoping to run in 2020. With the vaccine news, we're hoping that that's able to get out pretty quickly. That will allow people to start traveling again. So the first trip that we have in 2020 is in February to an incredible beach called Kolola. This beach has as many as 40,000 nests per season and 2 million hatchlings. When we were there last December, there were between 300 and 500 nests per night on the beach, and we were releasing several thousand hatchlings every single night. It's a really extraordinary experience on the Pacific coast of Mexico. In March, we're offering our first trip to the Galapagos, which we're very excited about. We're going to be working with a sea turtle program there. We're going to be visiting the famous tortoises of the Galapagos, checking out other conservation programs, as well as looking for turtles in the water, looking for other wildlife, and learning about the amazing history of the archipelago. We have 2 leatherback trips, one in May, one in June, where you can work with these incredible animals. They can be more than 6 feet long, 800 pounds. There's really no other creature on Earth like them. Both trips, and primarily the June trip, there's going to be quite a few hatchlings to bring this photo back to be able to work with and release, which is a really magical experience. And then finally in August, we have a Belize ocean wildlife trip where we're going to work with turtles, manatees, studying dolphins, studying conchs. Really amazing trip. Belize is extraordinary. We have one trip that's already full. We're currently taking waiting list, and if we get enough people on the waiting list, we may add a second trip. For all of our trips, we're taking a number of steps to keep people safe through the pandemic, including reducing the group size, spreading out meal times, and adapting our transportation, all kinds of things like that. So you can find on our website all the precautions that we're taking. So we've won awards for our programs. You know, we offer real experiences that help benefit the communities and the local conservation programs. So we hope you'll consider traveling with us at some point in the future. Take a quick breath here. Tip number 7. Sea turtles dig the dark. We didn't come up with that. That's somebody else's slogan, probably the Sea Turtle Conservancies, who's a great organization who does a lot of work on this issue that we partner with quite a bit. So what do we mean by that? Sea turtles like to dig in the dark. They don't like light. When a sea turtle comes up to nest on a nesting beach, they prefer darker ones because they're less susceptible to predators. They can less be seen. So they may avoid beaches like this one that have brightly lit hotels, different accommodations, things on the beach. Conversely, the hatchlings are attracted to light, and so we have to make sure that for example, this nest here that you see blocked off, when those hatchlings surface, usually happens at night, they may get drawn in towards this hotel because of that light. And so if you live on a nesting beach, near a nesting beach, make sure that your lights are not being shining onto the beach. Turn them off as much as possible during nesting seasons. If you have lights that you can't turn off, then use fixtures that direct light away from the beach, or use red or amber bulbs, which are less effective to sea turtles. Put a window tint or close your curtains for the interior lights. And if you're just on a turtle nesting beach while they're nesting, don't use white flashlights or take flash photos, because those can all cause issues for sea turtles. Again, we'll send out more information about this, but the Conserve Turtles website, the Sea Turtle Conservancy website, has a great program on this and how you can learn more. Moving on to number 8, choose sunscreen carefully. Did you know that your sunscreen can damage coral reefs? It's an estimated 14 million pounds of sunscreen ends up in the ocean from people's bodies every single year, and it can be really toxic. There are chemicals that can affect coral reefs and ocean animals in many kinds of sunscreen. In fact, probably most kinds of sunscreen. And so for that reason, some places like parts of Mexico, the entire state of Hawaii, have actually banned the sale of certain types of sunscreen that is polluting. So the things that you want to avoid are products that generally begin with O: oxybenzene, octinoxate, I think is how that's pronounced, octocrylene, things like that. Those are the most damaging chemicals in them. So if you're looking at sunscreen, you can look at the ingredients. If it has those, find something else. A general rule of thumb is look for simpler formulas, fewer ingredients, ingredients that you know what they are, not things like octinoxate. Creams and lotions are better than sprays, because as you're spraying that, if you're on a beach and you're spraying sunscreen all over your body, all the stuff that doesn't end up on your body is ending up in the air, which can blow out into the ocean, or on the sand. If you're on a nesting beach, that can contaminate nests and affect hatchlings, or it can wash into the ocean from rain, from tides, things like that. You will see that some sunscreens call themselves reef safe. Unfortunately, there's no regulation around that. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's any better for coral reefs. It might not have oxybenzone, but it might have other stuff that is not great. And so that doesn't necessarily mean what's better. We will send out an article that has really great tips and specific products that you can purchase. Generally, you have to order them. They're not, at this point, really available for sale in most stores, unfortunately, but hopefully that will change soon. Or you can not use sunscreen and use things like swim shirts and stuff to reduce or not have to use it at all when you're swimming, and prevent yourself from getting sunburned and preventing from polluting the ocean. Number 9, leave no trace. I mentioned that we believe every single sea turtle interacts with plastic on its lifetime. Well, there's something that you can do about that, and that's making sure that any plastic or waste that you have does not end up in the ocean or on the beach or really anywhere in nature. This is a really sad photo that I took from a beach in Mexico on the Yucatan Peninsula in a place called Siancan Biosphere Reserve, south of Tulum. This is a turtle nesting beach. And there's a great organization locally here, Global Vision International, that does twice-a-week beach cleanups. This is still what happens because they get it cleaned up and more stuff washes in. Some of the stuff they found from Japan, from Asia. It can go all around the world in the ocean. So what we recommend is, participate in ocean cleanup events or beach cleanup events. There's a coastal cleanup, is an international coastal cleanup that happens every September all over the world and all over the United States. You can find cleanups near you there. One here in Oregon where I live that I'm actually on the board of, a group called Sea Turtles Forever, has a program here on the Oregon coast where we do microplastic cleanup. So we take these screens and screen out, and it gets really, really tiny particles of plastic out of the beach, which can be as damaging than the big pieces of plastic that you can see. But we always recommend is whenever you go out into nature, if you see trash, pick it up. Obviously, you don't want to pick up anything that's rusty, dangerous, dead animal, stuff like that. Don't bother risking yourself for it. Always wash your hands afterwards. But if everybody picked up a little bit of trash and either recycled it if possible or got it into the trash after we're done, we would prevent a whole bunch of plastic from going out into the ocean. I've already mentioned some ways to prevent the amount of plastic that you use, but you can also prevent plastic from getting into the ocean that you find out in nature. Finally, wrapping up with number 10, save a baby turtle. We love this photo by Salvin Zenkel, a tremendous loggerhead photo I believe from Greece. So we have a program. It's called Billion Baby Turtles, and what we do is we're trying to save as many of these little hatchlings as we can. So far, we've saved nearly 4 million of them at more than 30 beaches around the world. So this is just some of the beaches that you can find here in the Western Hemisphere. But how do we do that? We raise it, number one, from donations. So you had to figure I was going to ask for donations here at some point. My puppy here wants you to donate if you could hear her. For every dollar that we raise, we can save 10 hatchlings on average at an important nesting beach around the world. We also have a number of great sponsors. Hold on, baby, I'm almost done. A number of great sponsors that you can support, and we're going to send it out here. We also have our online store. So, what kinds of turtles are we protecting with this program? Well, one is the Eastern Pacific Hawksbill turtle. As little as 10 years ago, people thought this turtle was gone from the entire Pacific coast of the Americas for all intensive purposes. But a couple of important nesting beaches were found, a couple in Nicaragua, one in El Salvador. And we've been partnering with local organizations, ICAPO, Procosta, Fauna and Flora International. And with our support, we've helped provide more than $50,000 over the past few years. These local organizations are now protecting every single hawksbill egg that's laid on these beaches and giving renewed hope for this population. I mentioned Kolola, which is an incredible story. This beach, 1999, they had only 500 nests, down from tens of thousands in the 1950s and 60s. People were eating the turtles, people were eating the eggs, and they were almost completely wiped out. This beach is 90+% of all the nesting for this subspecies, the black turtle. But for decades of work by the local Nava indigenous community, in partnership with people from the University of Michoacan, they have now brought this population back from the brink, and it's now one of the most important nesting beaches in the world. So to go from 500 nests to 40,000 in 20 years is one of the most successful wildlife conservation projects in the world. And so we provide some funding for them every year, and what that does is helps pay these really hilarious local kids, and they go out onto the beach at night, and they collect the eggs, and they bring them to a hatchery where they rebury them and protect them until they hatch, and then release them out into the water. So it helps support this local community in a place where there's very few other economic alternatives, and it helps the turtles. And so these are the types of places that we support with our Billion Baby Turtles program. So we have a link on our website. We're asking people this year to support our general programs because this has been, as you imagine, a tough year for our organization, and next year may also be tough as well. So a general support donation will help support Billion Baby Turtles. It'll help support True Red Aware, our educational programs, and others. Or you can donate directly to True Red Aware, the tortoiseshell program, or to Billion Baby Turtles, and I'll send out links for all of them. In our online store, we have symbolic baby turtle adoptions, where you can get a certificate and other things, fun stuff. It makes a great gift, and all the money goes to help supporting nesting beaches. Our online store, again, supports us, and we're having a sale. You can get 10% off. You get the code right on the website, and again, I'll send out a link. And we've created a holiday guide that lists our online store and all of our sponsors. We have about 30 different sponsors who all donate for every product that they sell, and that's jewelry and different accessories, clothes, all kinds of great things that you can find there. So That is the end of the presentation. I'm going to bring myself back here in just a quick second. Here is all of our social media handles if you're not already following us. And I'm going to come back here and have some time for questions. So give me 1 second. Oh, thank you, Ash. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You should all be able to see me again. Hello. So thank you so much again for joining us. If anybody has any questions, feel free to pop into the little chat button there, ask any questions, and I'll be happy to answer as many. You have about 15 minutes. We're going to try to keep this to an hour. So if you have questions, please let me know. And like I said, I will send out some afterwards. Okay. What are the nesting seasons for each species? That's a great question, Linda. And Annie, I've got your question too. So really, there are different seasons for different species depending upon where. So I'll just give one quick example. So in Costa Rica, there's a leatherback season that runs from March to June or so on the Caribbean coast, and then on the Pacific coast it's November to February or March. So there are sea turtles nesting everywhere around the world. Some, like the olive ridley turtle, will nest year-round, but it's really, there are hundreds of nesting beaches around the world, so I really can't tell you every single nesting beach. You should have my email from me sending out, Linda. If there's a specific species or place that you're interested in, I can probably find out, when any species is nesting in any one place if you want to ask. But yeah, it's everywhere all the time, all over the world. And he's asking, what's your favorite place or country that I've worked in? My field work all happened in Costa Rica, and I really, really enjoyed that. I spent about 2 years total working on several different nesting beaches there, primarily with leatherback turtles. And they are probably my favorite. They're so amazing. They diverged on the evolutionary line, millions of years ago from the other species of sea turtles, and they're really different in a lot of ways. They don't have the hard shell as the other sea turtles, hence the name leatherback. They're really fascinating. But every place that I've gone is really great in in different ways. Either, the people are wonderful, the places are beautiful, the nesting beaches are really great. So I've loved everywhere that I've really gone, but I do have a special place in my heart for Costa Rica. So how will saving turtles help our environment? So I talked about it a little bit. By having healthy numbers of sea turtles, we're helping coral reefs because they help control sponges that compete with coral. We're providing plenty of food for a whole bunch of different species for the eggs and the hatchlings. It helps seagrass. It helps coastal economies. It helps indigenous communities. They're really important for so many different reasons. Karen has a question. Are any of the turtles hatched off-site allowed to grow fairly large before being put into the ocean? So that's a good question. There is a thing called head starting that some places do. Generally, we don't believe, the sea turtle community in general, it's not really the most accepted conservation practice. The belief is that if you raise them up to a certain size so that they're not as vulnerable, that more of them can survive. And that may be true, but we don't know what the turtle is losing in terms of being in its natural habitat its whole life. A lot of captive turtles are not fed appropriately, and they may not be as suitable for surviving in the wild if they're released when they're bigger. In some cases, some of the places that raise them and release them may not take great care of them. They may take diseases, or they may have poor genetics, depending upon how they're raised, that can be released out into the wild sea turtle population. So generally, we don't, sea turtles, our belief is that, you get the hatchlings into the water and let nature take its course. Do you guys work with sea turtle veterinarians? We can. There are places, there are a bunch of sea turtle hospitals, primarily on the east coast of the U.S., that work with sea turtles that are caught. There are some projects like one in Costa Rica that may have injured turtles that try to rehabilitate them. Veterinarians can be important near sea turtle projects for things like doing spaying and neutering of pets. I mentioned that dogs and cats can be a problem. There are some organizations that will bring vets down that offer free spaying and neutering to local communities to reduce the number of feral animals, which helps the animals, it helps the people, and it helps the turtles. Jen has asked, is there anything that can be done to cool the nest temperatures that are producing too many females? Yes, to a certain extent. And so how that's done in some places is in places where people are still collecting the eggs to sell, to eat, there are organizations will build what we call hatcheries. And that's an area of sand that is blocked off, fenced off on the beach, that is watched 24 hours a day. When a nest is laid, the eggs are brought there, and a new human-made nest is dug out, and the eggs are put in there, and they're watched until they hatch. When they're hatched, they're then released out into the ocean. So what a lot of organizations are trying to do to manage the rising temperatures is by shading part of the hatchery. And so that can be done on a certain scale. If you're talking about a beach with a few hundred nests a year, you can build a hatchery big enough. If you're talking about a place like Kolola that has 2 million hatchlings, they do have a hatchery, they do shade part of it, but the reality is that most of those eggs are left on the beach and are just watched over, and there's no way to shade the whole beach. So we can control it to a certain extent, but we haven't figured out a great way to do it on a large scale. Moving on, Ash Adams asks, do we want to work in Guyana and the Caribbean? Yeah, there are. I'm aware of some great sea turtle nesting sites in Guyana. Feel free to get in touch with me. We do have grant funding that we give through Billion Baby Turtles. The money that we raise, we do give to nesting beaches. If you guys are in need of funding, if you work at that beach, send me an email. We might be able to help out. Raina asks, is there anything we use every day that has turtle shells? So historically and currently in a lot of places, tortoiseshell is turned into things like jewelry. In some places like Cartagena, we've seen it made into like serving spoons. There are like these, they're actually really quite beautiful if you're completely honest. Obviously, I don't promote them in any way, but they can make these beautiful headdresses that are worn in places. Panama, that's pretty popular. Colombia, fans, things like that. Most people, if you have it, if you either accidentally picked it up when you were traveling somewhere, or maybe hand-me-down jewelry. In fact, I'll be right back. I actually have some that people have sent us that we use for educational purposes. So this here is a necklace. I was at a friend's place here in Portland and saw that she had this, and she had accidentally purchased it in Cuba, not realizing what it was. And so now we use it for educational purposes. Trying to see other questions. So that's all the questions that I see here. I'll give another, give a little bit more time for any questions. So if there's any last ones here before we wrap up, thank you for joining, David. So it'll probably be tomorrow where I send out the follow-up email. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. Really enjoyed having you guys, really enjoyed being able to chat. If you think of any questions later on, or if I didn't get to your question, feel free to email me later. I'll be happy to answer as many as I can as well. I hope everybody out there stays safe. We're starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And so everybody stay safe, Hope you have a great holiday, and thank you for your support and time tonight. All right. Have a great night. Bye-bye, everybody.